I'm pleased to see all of you here today. Welcome, what a turnout. We're recording today's session. An abridged video of the session will be made available on CGS's YouTube channel next week. I'd like to remind everyone that while book club is an open forum for discussion, we want authors to be able to speak frankly and, where appropriate, to do so off the record. We therefore do not allow AI assistants to record the session. Please do not use them. If this is your first time joining the CGS Book Club and you'd like to be kept informed about upcoming book club sessions, please drop a message in the chat. We'll add you to our group email. Today is our first session on the future in the past, Reconstructing Article 109.3 of the UN Charter towards the San Francisco Promise to Constitutionalize the United Nations and international law. We're joined today by the book's author, Dr. Shahryar Shirai. Welcome, Dr. Shirai. I'll introduce Dr. Shirai properly shortly, but first, some housekeeping. First, to ensure everyone gets a chance to join in, I'll ask everyone to keep their sessions or comments to 2 minutes. If you exceed that time, I'll interject to ask you to wrap up so that everyone has an opportunity to speak. Once everyone that would like to ask a question or make a comment has had the opportunity to do so, I'll open the floor to further discussion with a second round of questions and comments. Does anyone object to the community agreement for the Q&A? Okay, thank you. You can raise your hands virtually or physically, or put your questions in the chat. I'll come to you on a first come, first served basis. We'll stop at about 10 minutes before the end of the session at around 1:20 for any announcements you may wish to make unrelated to book club. Please, therefore, hold on to any comments you may have that are not related to book club until the end, or you can put them in the chat at any time. With housekeeping out of the way, it is my pleasure to introduce the author of The Future in the Past, Reconstructing Article 109.3 of the UN Charter towards the San Francisco Promise to Constitutionalize the United Nations and international law, Dr. Shahryar Shirai. Dr. Shirai is the founder, president, and executive director of the Center for United Nations Constitutional Research based in Brussels, and is mastermind behind the Youth Climate Ambassador Program. Dr. Shirai possesses a PhD in international law from the University of Kent. His thesis, Reconstructing Article 109.3 of the UN Charter towards Constitutionalization of the United Nations and international law, is the basis of the book we're covering here today. For over 30 years, Dr. Shirai has engaged in activism advocating for nuclear disarmament, UN reform, the International Criminal Court, and democratic global governance. He's participated in numerous civil society forums addressing UN reform and has been an NGO stakeholder at the COP negotiations on climate change since COP25. Dr. Shirai will be known to some of you as a former member of the Governing Council of the World Federalist Movement, Institute for Global Policy, and as a member of CGS. With that said, it's now my pleasure to hand over to you, Shahryar. Please, Shahryar, please take it away as to why you wrote the book and highlights of chapters 1 and 2.
First of all, my honor to be with friends. And the reason I wrote the book was because of you. I've been a member of the Association of World Federalist Movement, USA, since 1980s. And a lot of you and those who are not amongst us anymore have been my mentors. So the reason was interesting. In one of the World Federalist Movement meetings, I had the honor of knowing Mr. Francisco Palancarte from Mexico, who is right now in the audience. And he gave a speech and he talked about Article 109 charter reform. from his organization in Mexico. And he talked about Article 109, Paragraph 3, which there was supposed to be a charter review. But that inspired me. He didn't know much more. And this wasn't really new. Tad Daly, who's also amongst us, I think in 1990s, he also was pursuing Article 109. And again, amongst you, Joseph Barata, his books have been very helpful in terms of some of the information that I put together and used as reference. And those who are not amongst us, like Joe Schwartzberg, was also inspirational, John Sutter, and some of the Democratic World Federalists in San Francisco. So this was very intriguing to me. What happened? Why we never had a charter review? It says Article 109, Paragraph 3 very clearly says we should, but why didn't we have it? Then I started searching. At that time, Google, now we have AI. And I couldn't find anything. Everything would stop in 1957, 1960, and there was only 2-3 articles, and that was it. So I had to go to the original sources. And I studied at UC Berkeley for my bachelor's. Fortunately, and I had a library card, fortunately, UC Berkeley was the publishing house for the San Francisco conference, right across the bay. So they had original documents but they wouldn't let you check out. So I had to camp there and look at some of the documents, which were daily meeting minutes of the San Francisco conference. Those were compiled not then, 7 years later, and in later sessions, I tell you when it happened, 7 years later in a 22-volume called UNCIO. And this documentation, UN Conference on International Organization, was the creation of the UN, documents the San Francisco. And it has daily reports, even the movies they went to see, the daily activities, really interesting document, but not accessible. Like some universities claim to have it. I even went to Oxford, and 2-3 volumes, the main ones were missing. And of course, the UN library had them. I had to photograph a lot of them. I read through them, and I found it fascinating. And how the spirit of Article 109, Paragraph 3 was made. It was not part of the Dumbarton Oaks proposal. It was, in my opinion, a grand compromise that with anti-veto rebels was made in San Francisco to have them, sign off on the UN Charter. And we'll be discussing those further later on. But then, I came for my PhD here in Brussels, but actually it's University of Kent in Canterbury. And I started the research, and the findings, some were accidental, very interesting accidental findings, and some were, premeditated, like Article 109, Paragraph 3, that what happened to it. It was like a test, to do a test result on a provision that wasn't exercised on, its legal effect. And the book is really intended for policymakers, international lawyers, diplomats, but I think for you folks is easy reading. For some other folks, maybe it's a little bit difficult. It's academic and again, intended for international lawyers as a reference. It has 700 plus references. Some of you who are here, I've also referred to your names in the references. And it was very exciting. And I'm happy to be here and ready to get going.
So, do you have comments about highlights of chapters 1 and 2.
Yeah, actually, I
Sure.
think the introduction and the prologues are important. And if you allow me, I'll start with those. And I think the best thing is if I can do screen sharing and go over the ebook version of the book, and then that way we can all together see it. Is that okay?
Sounds fine with me.
Yeah, okay, so let's do that. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't. Do some people see it and others don't?
Those
I see it.
who see it, maybe should raise their hands. Yeah, most people are seeing it.
Huh. All right, well, proceed. I don't know
Marjolaine,
where it is, but go ahead. I'll listen.
yeah, Marjolaine, you raised your hand. Is there something you wanted to say?
Oh, no, it was just a signal that I can see your screen. Thank you.
Oh, okay. All right, very good. So going over the book, I want to start with some very important quotations from our founders and those who fought for Article 109, paragraph 3. So we'll start with, let me just, what the stakeholders said at the San Francisco anti-veto rebellion. By the way, the only other couple of places talked about anti-veto or rebellion or uprising in San Francisco is in the Act of Creation book, which was Schlesinger, I think, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, his book. And this was right after, I think, a 50-year moratorium on a State Department on what happened in San Francisco. Those documents were released, and those which were kind of secret. And his book was based on that. And because when you look at textbooks, everything is that's, the UN Charter was made unanimously adopted, and it was the greatest document, which it is in a way, but there was no opposition. It was unanimously adopted. And in his book, there are some facts which made me investigate more. So these are what the quotations I'm showing you here is from that 22-volume UNCIO official UN documents, which were published 7 years later. And here are the quotations. If a great power could cast a cloak of protection over a small aggressor power by the exercise of the right of veto, then the work of the Security Council would be reduced to complete futility. Who said it? Peter Fraser, Prime Minister of New Zealand at that time. And we see the examples, the proxies of the Permanent Five do violations, but then they're protected by the veto of their P5 sponsors. They could see when they were reading the charter, the Prime Minister of New Zealand could see this is coming. How could that be offered as a peace and security in the UN Charter? The Charter is the greatest document of its kind that has ever been formulated. This was Tom Colony's comment, chair of the US Senate on Foreign Relations and the chair of the Security Council Committee. They had 3 commissions and multiple committees. So he was in charge of the outcome of the Security Council to be adopted. Then we have, okay. If unanimity really existed among the great powers, the veto was superfluous Furthermore, the veto might help to bring on war through lack of action by the Council. The Cuban delegation wanted not only world order, but world justice. And this was Guillermo Belt Ramirez, I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly, head of the delegation of Cuba. Look at this vision, He says it's not just because of you. By the way, nowhere in the charter the word veto is mentioned. It's always concurrence or unanimity. And the concurrence means that all permanent 5 concur. So the word veto is not in the charter. So the references here, unanimity means no veto. If no veto, then, if there by just not acting on a, security issue or armed conflict, the work of the Security Council becomes irrelevant. And that's exactly, we see all these happening in the past 80 years, many cases. Next, the veto was contrary to the principle of equality of nations expressed in the preamble of the charter. Constitutional revision is a must. This was by Dr. Berta Lutz, one of the only 6 women in the 200 delegates at San Francisco that had signature rights. So some countries, even though there was only 50 countries, to some accounts 51 countries, but some had more than 1 signatures and authorized signatories. So there were only 6 women, and Berta Lutz from Brazil, head of the delegation of Brazil, was one of them. And this, what she's referring to, is in the preamble, it says that all nations are equal. But then when you get to Security Council, they are unequal. There is permanent 5 which have superpowers. Next, Lord Halifax, of the acting chairman of the UK and Northern Ireland in San Francisco. The United Nations is no enchanted palace. Next is India. Ramaswamy Mudaliar, Chief Delegate of India. If this unanimity rule were not to be applied at the end of 10 years to any proposal regarding the amendment of the charter, we could safely and with complete trust and confidence in the 5 great powers agree to the complete Yalta formula during the intervening period of 10 years. My God, look, Yalta formula. Veto was created in Yalta, not in Ukraine war. What's going on? Russia is taking advantage of that Yalta formula and has invaded Ukraine and has taken actually Yalta in 2014. And the Indian chief could see that as an issue and a big problem. So in a way, he's saying that, and we'll get to the right chapter, that, the context of when he was saying that listen, guys, the P5, we're signing this on the assumption that not only we will have the charter review in 10 years' time, but you guys refrain from vetoing the ratification, because we're going to get to that. The charter review, its outcome has 2 steps. One step that is adopted by the review conference or constitutional conference, you may call, and the second phase is the ratification, which may take up to 2 years, and then a big power can veto. So he's referring that, hey guys, you are promising that not only we are going to have charter review, but you are not going to veto the results. This is India. Charter, a world order in which the mice could be stamped out, but in which the lion would not be restrained. And this was Escuelo Padilla, Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Mexico. In drawing the charter, we have recognized that it must be flexible, that we must be able to undo later anything which proves unworkable or clumsy in new circumstances, or to readjust particular features of the organization to the happier world which we believe a lasting peace will bring. into being. And this was Francis Forde, Prime Minister of Australia. The proposed council is a quasi-judicial organ that mixes the jury, the judge, and the executioner. This was Ellen van Cleffen, Foreign Minister of Netherlands. Very interesting statement, very short, but you will see later that Security Council, instead of having the separation of power between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative, is all three. And you'll see examples of how the Security Council could be all three. But these guys were seeing this is coming. These actions this is before the formation of Security Council. Though the right of veto was an evil, his delegation accepted it. That was Watim Naim, Minister of Interior and Education of Lebanon. They knew it was an evil, but for now they were accepting it. Yes, I went on. You can say you defeated the veto, but you can also say we tore up the charter. At that point, I sweepingly ripped the charter draft in my hands to shreds and flung the scraps and disgust on the table. The delegates fell silent while I stared belligerently at one face after another. Who was this guy? That was Senator Tom Colony from Texas, who was, again, the chief delegate from US, and he was in charge of the Security Council. This is from his autobiography. And again, this was revealed like 7-8 years later by him. So this is also a very dramatic scene in San Francisco conference that he walks in the final session of the Security Council committee before the vote. He rips the charter and tells them, this is what it is. Take it or leave it. And even imagine on those days, how these people got to San Francisco, some of them by train, some of them by US airplanes. And it wasn't that they could just, book a trip back to their home countries. So this was very dramatic scene, and it's in the section that I called the Connolly Act and the cocktail with Molotov, because Mr. Molotov of Russia was the prime signatory or the prime person in San Francisco representing Soviet Union. The great majority of the countries represented in this conference, however, do share the fears of Colombia, of Cuba, and a considerable number of abstentions was registered. It is apparent that those abstentions have the same meaning as our negative vote. Without the negative vote of Colombia and Cuba, the veto power would have appeared as unanimously adopted, and the abstentions would have been interpreted in a different light. This was Lleras Camargo, Foreign Minister of Colombia. And this is the context right after Connolly Act and ripping the charter, they put it to vote that we are going to keep the Security Council exactly the way it was from Dumbarton Oaks, with the veto given to the permanent members. They didn't call it permanent 5, it was called permanent members, because France was later co-opted. They didn't know how many permanent 5s they were going, how many permanent members they were going to have. So at that meeting, we'll see that in the chapter, again, a very dramatic session, 12 midnight, in San Francisco Opera House, or one of the rooms there. They put the Security Council to vote. And only 2 countries voted no, it was Cuba and Colombia, but about 11 countries, and I'll name them later, abstained. And he's explaining the context. This is very important, that those 11 were really no's. And then it wouldn't have passed. But they were kind of intimidated to vote yes. So I think this is the context he's conveying, and we'll see it later. In memory of President Roosevelt at the Tehran conference, Iran has proposed amendments to the charter to make ICJ jurisdiction obligatory and replace the council veto with a 2/3 majority vote. This was Mustafa Ad, Justice Minister of Iran. And the context here is that in my evaluation and research, there were two places that I could identify who were the anti-veto camp. And those were either they spoke against it in preliminary sessions. Most of what the quotations I used are from there, but some of them had actually officially submitted amendment to the charter. And there was 21 amendments to the charter, and this was one of them, proposing changes to the Security Council, either in terms of its composition, how many countries, or in terms of its voting method. So whoever was submitted the amendment proposal or spoke against the proposed Security Council in the committees or the plenary sessions, those are I've classified as anti-veto, you might call rebels. Okay. After a time, the great powers would be willing to consider elimination of the veto. TV Soong, Minister for Foreign Affairs, China. Belgium believed that providing for a full examination of the charter in a review conference would demonstrate that the opportunity for reform exists. Paul Henry Spaak, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Belgium. In fact, the street is named after him. Just 2 miles from me, and he was the foreign minister then. What was called the veto of the great powers is certainly not in keeping with the legal ideal, which we do not despair, will someday be established by common accord between peoples. That was Georges Bidault, Minister of Foreign Affairs, France. So these were some of the, I think, very important quotations that we can relate to in our existing current affairs. Now, this is my photo in Waterloo, and let me just share with you where our offices is in Brussels. It's very small, but very strategically located. I got it, I guess, disable the. Just a second. Do you see me, by the way? Yeah, okay. So, yeah, this is behind those forests, about 40 kilometers. It's a park and a forest, is actually Waterloo, where the sovereignty of states was put to test and the first battles between sovereign states started. This is a German ambassador's house. This is Lebanese consulate, and only a few miles away we are from the European Parliament. Bob has been there. A couple of you have been here. Marjolaine has been here. So it's a good place to work. It gives you hope because the Battle of Waterloo, which was the absolute sovereignty of states, and World War I, World War II, it all has now led to 27 countries forming the European Union, which they are now talking about collective sovereignty or collective security rather than absolute sovereignty of each state. It's not quite a federal system, but it's definitely a supranational system. So the whole concept, the whole idea is to constitutional justice rather than, and courts, not coffins. By the way, James, you can let me know as far as my timing, but I know I have enough time right now. I'm going to read you this part. To a lot of you, it's not new, but it's still, to some of you, it is. Why not failed global state? When a state has no government, we call it a failed state. Some recent examples include the chaotic situation in DRC Congo, Haiti, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, and all war theaters, including parts of Palestine and Ukraine. As the UN is not a world government, global governance is left to international law. This is characterized as having no hierarchy, little judicial independence or due process of law, and no supreme or appeals court, unlike what we would expect in national laws. Furthermore, it's called primitive, as it has no accessible or secondary rules on changing the law and relies on the sovereign states, not the people as lawmakers. And in fact, what we're talking about, charter review, is the fact that there is no secondary laws, that how you can, there is no like 4-year elections or a Supreme Court or a constitutional court to review the existing charter. That's why it's been practically frozen for 80 years. Why the peoples are subjects of law, they are not allowed to be lawmakers or benefactor interlocutors. According to UN law, 5 of the 119 sovereign states are absolute sovereigns, whereas the remaining 188 must share their sovereignty under the council orders. So 188 have to accept the collective rules, but 5 don't. In other words, the permanent 5 of the Security Council that they're choosing in any decision can hover above the law and reign supreme over the others. Why publish academic research from 8 years ago now? In global governance terms, urgency. The rediscovery that the prescription for the better future may lie in the past. In the past 12 months, as of summer of 2024, there have been over 50 open wars. Now, there are estimates that in the past 12 months, there have been 67 open wars. And, adding India, Pakistan, Iran, Israel, US, yeah, there are easily more than 50 now. And armed conflicts around the world, and many more lie dormant, waiting to happen. Over 40,000 of our world citizens have died in Israel, Palestine alone, including 15,000 innocent children, and another 17,000 who have been orphaned or separated from their families. Of course, these numbers are a lot higher now. The casualty figures, being secret, are estimated to be even higher in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Wars injure indiscriminately, impacting our animals, plants, and the environment too. With hundreds of millions of tons of CO2 annually generated by militaries, wars fuel the climate crisis. When we consider all the significant conflicts since World War II, smaller wars, genocides, and civil conflicts, the cumulative death toll is estimated at 70 million. This number exceeds the military death attributed to World War II. We talk about, World War III, but in my opinion, we are having it. It's an ongoing thing, and right now, it has surpassed the death in World War II. So it depends how you define world wars. UNHRC, every year for the past 12 years, sorry, did I miss anything? Yeah. I know what I missed. According to UNHCR, every year for the past 12 years, the number of conflict migrants has increased. We now have a record 120 million war refugees, far surpassing World War II. From the hundreds of wars, big and small, that we have been burdened with since then, even when we are not fighting, we are annually spending 2.2 trillion or $250 million an hour, 250 million 1 hour on military equipment and tools that if used will cause havoc, and if unused are still a monumental waste of talent and resources. In President Eisenhower's terms, the money that we are stealing from people experiencing poverty, and may I add climate change, this is my addition to President Eisenhower's, climate change mitigation is granted to the military-industrial complex. Another way of repurposing this money would be what the UNFCCC and the COP climate negotiations have come up with. The annual $2 trillion needed for global government investment to fund renewable energy mitigation and adaptation to end the climate crisis. In other words, what we're spending in military, either accidentally or coincidentally, is almost the same budget that we need to control the climate. Nuclear arsenals are becoming more potent and increasingly discussed by strategists and leaders with Hiroshima-type logic as having first use and purposeful military applications, to the point that we are getting closer to taking our wars to the stars. Let's talk about Star Wars. Russia being opposed to a US resolution to curb its tinkering and implementing of nukes in space, where it could kill most satellites in a limited nuclear explosion, knocking down GPS, internet, weather, and communication satellites. That impacts all of us all over the world, regardless of who is fighting with whom. Russia defeated the resolution with the single Security Council veto, when they wanted to control, demilitarize space. And then when China and Russia tabled the counter proposal to demilitarize outer space, including nuclear completely, the USO vetoed it down with a big no. So the first part that Russia vetoed, it was just regarding nuclear. When Russia and China proposed that we have a sort of a military-free zone in space, it was the US that vetoed. And this was, I think, in 2024. Fellow planetary citizens, accept future wars unrelated to us to cause massive disruption in our land, air, and sea transportation, shutting down our methods of communication and the internet we rely on. This is in addition to food, health, migration, inflation, and economic insecurities that during conflicts, even conflicts far away from us are affecting our oil prices and food prices, and especially Africa with the Ukraine war, they were heavily affected, even though they were not in the war zone. During the Ukraine, Russia, and Israel-Gaza wars so far, we have had at least 7 vetoes just in the past 2 years. Something that the anti-veto rebellions expected, but nobody expected so many vetoes. Primarily by 2 of the P5 permanent members of the Apartheid Security Council. Each veto has meant no end to war, no ceasefire, or even a pause, thus stealing the hope of peace for the affected and the inflicted. Our 2 international courts, the International Court of Justice and International Criminal Court, are weak legal systems with limited jurisdiction and practically no enforcement. In the case of the ICJ, the genocide case filed by South Africa against Israel, the ICJ could not decide on even provisional measure to stop or mitigate the fighting. The ICJ is not independent of the Council. Where 5 of its 15 judges are P5 selected and depend on the Council for enforcement. Again, a lot of these things are not new to you folks, the World Federalists, because you know that in order for an ICJ case to be implemented or adjudicated, it depends on Security Council, where again, the veto power can stop any kind of action there. And this was in the Nicaragua case, mining case. And depends on the Council for Enforcement, again, at the mercy of the P5, who can singularly stop justice from being carried out. In the recent case of the ICC, head of state, Putin, Trump, Biden, and Netanyahu have all dodged its rulings and even issued travel restrictions and arrest warrants for the ICC judges and prosecutors who dare to summon the potential perpetrators to appear at the court. This contempt of the court has made a mockery of international law, its independence, and the principle of rule of law. International law, stuck in its 1600 Westphalian European origins of a state-centric absolute sovereigns, is primitive and does not recognize the people as the planet's sovereigns. In the fragmented international law during wars, both sides and their supporters extensively refer to international humanitarian law. If you look at the news these days, there is all talk about international law or international humanitarian law. One of the bits of international law to justify their actions, whereas IHL is the law of war. In other words, the legalization of what is considered acceptable killing, acceptable torture, taking captives, and forcing migration. If wars are made unacceptable for conflict resolution and abolished in the UN Charter, then there is no need for inhumanitarian law. The future in the past, with all its the good it does, the UN is a World War II architecture with the Security Council that is apex. The Council is not only intra-virus in war and peace, but sees all collective security in its competency. However, the Council has been stagnant when it comes to the global existential threats posed by climate change, pandemics, food security, outer space, and artificial general intelligence.
I'm
Dr.
getting a
Shelley, may I
signal here
intervene
that
to ask,
Yes, go ahead, James.
just to ask if you could begin to wrap up your introductory comments so we could move forward to the Q&A. Gail, over to you.
Okay, sure. So how many minutes do I have?
Very few.
Okay, all right, so I make it fast. The founding fathers, being aware of the insecurity risk of the Security Council and believing the United Nations is a work in progress, gifted us the key to transformation of the Charter. The Charter review and upgrade, the change process and gateway we have never tried before to make the UN 2.0 possible. This research builds a legal case for upholding the San Francisco Promise of Article 109, Paragraph 3, constructing a social contract between the United Nations and the planetary citizens. I go to acknowledgements very briefly. I'm also indebted to my NGO colleagues, Francisco Plancarte, lawyer and president of Planet Affiliate in Mexico, for being the first to introduce me to the paradox of Article 193, and Dr. John Sutter, retired executive of Asia Foundation, and Professor Lucio Levi of University of Torino, and editor of the Federalist Debate, for their recommendations. Many thanks also to Dr. Roger Potilla, Vice President of DW San Francisco, Marjolaine Snippet, and Bob Hansen, and other World Federalist colleagues who critically followed my research, particularly the legislative findings, perhaps a game changer as the UN enters its 8th decade. My thanks also go to my Dutch and Japanese World Federalists, fellow counselors, and Joe Schwartzberg and Daniel Schaubacher, who provided me with both source material and moral support. Last but not least, my gratitude goes to my lovely wife for her patience during these years and for her support in so many areas, with the University of California, Berkeley being one of the official presses of the 1945 conference. She copied thousands of pages for me. I'm not going to go over the content. Let's get, there's a table of abbreviations, some useful, hopefully, for you folks, and some court cases. The court cases that I've quoted here are relevant to legal justification. The prologue is a classical thing we did with the World Federalists. Peace requires justice, justice requires law, law requires government, world peace requires world government. And this is when I was a foot soldier in San Francisco for World Federalists. And I had the opportunity to take Senator George McGovern. They gave me the assignment, and to the 1984 Democratic Convention. being convened in San Francisco. Democrats were deciding whom to elect on their ticket. And there, actually, we were pushing the campaign for UN reform, offshoot of World Federalist USA campaign. It was led by Walter Hoffman. And there was 14 points they were mentioning. And I was handing out flyers for, guess what, International Criminal Court. And that was of the 14 plans that we had for International Criminal Court. Only the Permanent Court for International Crimes, in other words, ICC, came to fruition. Chapter 1 talks about the mystery of global governments, the role of the UN, and constitutionalization, which again, to you folks, you're very much familiar with it, that global governance is not global government. You know, when you talk to individuals, they think of, okay, we've got the UN, we've got the International Criminal Court.
Shahryar, sorry to interrupt. We have 10 minutes left. We usually have about 15 or 20 for the discussion.
Oh, okay. All right, so let's...
I must
finish
interrupt.
off,
I must interrupt. Bob, that's incorrect. We have 40 minutes left, but Shahryar, please do wrap up.
We go till the half hour after?
Yes, we go to the half hour.
Okay, my correction.
So,
Thank you.
Dr. Sherry, if you could please wrap up so we could bring the Q&A. I know a lot of people they've read the chapters, so they're keen to talk to you about them. So perhaps we can make a break now and move on to the Q&A. Would that be okay?
Just give me, just for future follow-up, just give me 2 minutes. Okay, so this is the talk about what constitutional UN would mean, and that would be, again, the people having rights to govern themselves by doing elections, having a world parliament, and it talks about those sections. Then major findings in the book that we don't need to discuss right now. There is 3, I think. One of them is rediscovery or discovery, and 2 of them very important accidental findings. We talk about it. Then chapter 2 is regarding the unpredicted or outside of the competency of the Security Council, which is its court making, and it's actually, let me stop sharing here. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, the court making and the sanction committees. And that started with the former Yugoslavia, and the last court that the Security Council has created is the Tribunal for Lebanon. This is despite ICC coming into power or having competency or jurisdiction. And the sanction committees. Currently, we have 14 sanction committees where the UN Security Council can define criminals. Per my last research, there were about 1,000 NGOs and individuals classified as criminals by the Security Council. To end, I have a good news and bad news. The bad news that all of us, you guys at your home, me here, can be declared by Security Council decision as criminals. No judges, no courts, and this would be a sanction committee. The good news is that with paragraph 3, charter review, hopefully we can change that. Okay, I'm ready for Q&A. Sorry for taking more time than allocated.
Okay, we'll now open the floor to questions. You can raise your virtual or physical hand or put your question in the chat box on a first come, first served basis. You'll have 2 minutes to ask your question or comment for Shahryar.
Well, Shahryar, good seeing you again. And first, my apologies for interrupting. I thought it was just an hour. So my question is, as you recall, back in the days when Bill Pace was the executive director, you and he had a kind of ongoing debate where you argued for charter review as soon as possible. And he was saying, well, charter review, yes, but not now. Because if we were going to do it now, the UN would only be made weaker given the cast of characters we have. And, you know, over the years, people have agreed, you know, some people have agreed with you, some people have agreed with him. Now, my question is, given the recent meeting in China with many of the world's dictators, autocrats, and would-be dictators seeking to create a new world order in their image, I wonder, in light of that, how you would view the issue of charter review, when the timing would be right, how to go about it, and anything you can say in light of that, because I do see that as really potentially a major event in world history, that meeting that just happened and what could come out of that. So if you can speak to that, thank you.
Do we take one question at a time or two, three at a time?
Well, I
Okay.
thought that was just one. Oh, I'm sorry. Other people.
Yeah, that's okay. Actually, very good question. A big debate, not only within our own World Federalist movement, but also I've asked this from Ambassador of France as well as Ambassador of Germany in Japan, and it's very interesting. Basically, the argument is that a lot of the achievements of the UN may go, you know, the charter would be ripped. The smaller countries, the non-aligned movement, they're all going to try to, you know, enforce their own wills, and the result would be a UN which is torn apart. And this was the argument then. My argument was that, first of all, a lot of the achievements, in substantial achievements, otherwise in terms of technology, AIDS, peacekeeping, UN has been wonderful, no doubt about it. But in terms of, like, for example, human rights, in terms of climate change, in terms of International Criminal Court, they're all outside of the UN. They are not related to UN. ICC is a separate treaty. You know, the Paris Accord is a separate treaty. WTO is a separate treaty. In fact, for many years, since I would say 1970s, UN has been sidelined. None of these are UN treaties. UN is sort of like a debating ground for them. Whereas, like, for example, UN created some of the earlier treaties. So the point is that that wouldn't fall apart. Those are staying with the charter review. Secondly, I think what's going to happen, and we get to it in further chapters, in charter review, as they say, the poo-poo is going to hit the fan. Everybody's going to be unhappy because of their own reasons. And they're going to want push their own things, like you were talking about the China-Russia coalition, or, you know, the BRICS. Everybody's going to try to achieve more power for themselves. And the P5 doesn't want to give up their power. So they're going to come to a standstill, but they're going to come then believe in shared security, shared common goals to global solutions, that how do you handle global challenges through global solutions. And that becomes the same logic that happens to us in our domestic governments. We have all these different interest groups, but we finally decided to have election, to have, you know, legislation, and let that process, democratic process, take care of the issues, rather than sovereign states or sovereign people, each individual passing the, you know, traffic light. That's, you know, that's optimum freedom, right? But then they decided that's not really the case. So the third reason that I think a charter should be kept is the San Francisco Promise. These people that I read you the quotations, the only reason they signed up to the charter was that in 10 years' time it's going to change. What are we going to tell them? You know, that's our founding fathers. It's a breach that P5 are doing by not holding the charter review. Thanks.
Okay, Anne, did you have your hand up? It wasn't clear to me. You're muted. And I see Tad Daly's hand.
Very brief. My two questions are, who are I think I know, but tell us the two members of the Security Council who have been responsible for the most vetoes. And I also want to comment that from the point of view of selling the idea of charter review and further activity to achieve the goals, it seems to me that the two most important things you said during your presentation to us today are the amount of money that is being spent on weaponry and the number of wars we are engaged in that amount to World War III. Those are concepts that need to be presented and accepted widely by publics around the world in order to develop an appetite for pressure to achieve charter review and further achievements toward world federation. It seems to me. What do you think?
Yes, yes. Well, regarding the two countries, it's Russia #1 and USA #2. Each have used it. Well, actually, we did a research with Marko Filjovic, Dr. Marko Filjovic, our research fellow here. And first of all, veto has different shapes and form. We've got double veto, we've got a veto, and threat of veto. So even though there are a few hundred vetoes used during the past 80 years, and a lot of them the past couple of years, but threat of veto, something not getting even go to the table to be discussed, is the threat. So Russia says, I'm going to veto this. Don't bring it up. Or US says, don't talk about the Palestinian independence. Don't even talk about it. I'm going to veto it. So there is a lot of hidden vetoes and double vetoes. So they're the two countries most responsible. And I couldn't agree with you more that this is such and as we talked about taking from the poor, taking from the climate change, taking from AI governance and putting it into military. This is absolute waste.
Okay, Tad?
Thank you, Gail Hughes. Hello, Shahryar. Point one, I just really want to commend your scholarship on this. It's very impressive. This deep research you did into the archives, the founding of the United Nations. Are you guys hearing me? Are you getting an echo? Is it okay?
That's fine.
Good, okay. Yeah, I really want to applaud the immense amount of work that you put into
Well,
this.
you've been one of the inspirational guys, back what you
well,
did.
thank you very much. That's nice of you to say.
I wish you hadn't given up.
Starting in the 50th anniversary year, and now, at least for me, and now we're in the 80th anniversary year. We're not done yet, though. We're not giving up yet, Shahryar.
Right.
Point two, forgive me, I may have to leave early. Forgive me in advance if I have to bolt before we end at 10:30. My question is this. I think the big picture history that you were telling us is that in San Francisco, between April and June of 1945, the United States and the Soviet Union, most notably, insisted on this veto. Many states said, no, that's a non-starter. We ain't going to vote for that. That doesn't really create anything like a legislative function at the world level. And so the compromise was, if you all vote for this, we will have this charter review conference in 10 years. That's the big history that you are telling that I sort of understand. I know there's a lot more details to it. So with that, I have a two-part question. One, is that an accurate rendition of the big historical story? And two, I posted this in the chat. I'm confused by those quotes from U.S. Senator Tom Connolly. Does that mean that he was opposed to Article 109 and said that quote was perplexing? You have stopped the veto, but you were ripping up the charter. It sounded to me, unless I'm totally misunderstanding, like Tom Connolly was insisting on the veto and didn't want to ever have a charter review.
Right.
So thank you, Shahryar, very much.
Sure, yeah. Thanks a lot, Tad, for inspiring me to do this research, your work. But basically, the veto was decided before the San Francisco conference in its exact shape and form. This was in Yalta, and it's called Yalta Formula. And in the book, I talk about antidote to the Yalta Formula. So, and all three states wanted the veto. Russia for sure, because they thought this is a capitalistic threat, and I'm the only communist country. They may decide to invade me, right after World War II. So they wanted the veto. The British wanted the veto because they were a colony, and they wanted France to join a permanent five because they knew Russia and US are going to be against colonialism to some extent. Although they had minimal colonialism themselves, but compared to the British Empire and the French, it was nothing. So the British wanted it. They didn't want to lose India. They didn't want to lose all these countries that they were controlling, and they wanted to have a right to veto. So they wanted it. US wanted it light. In other words, similar to League of Nations. They wanted it that if a state was conflict to the, party to the conflict, they cannot veto. So if Russia is fighting with Ukraine, they cannot veto a resolution against them. So they wanted it light. They wanted a modified version. And the only reason Roosevelt wanted it was that he was afraid it won't get passed in the Congress, just like League of Nations. But he wanted it light. But unfortunately, he died before the San Francisco conference started 2-3 months earlier. So the veto was decided. Now the scenario that happened, the drama, we're going to go over it in the later chapters, but this was given to colony. Colony's mission was to get this approved without any touching. So Article 109 was introduced in the San Francisco conference, but it doesn't don't have veto. It just says, let's have a charter review, right? So Connolly's mission was to make sure that it gets adopted in San Francisco, the Yalta Formula, and that's what happened. And he ripped the, the charter and said, if you guys don't want it, go home. Right.
DeFrancisco, your turn. You must be on mute.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask Dr. Sharei if he agrees that in Mexico we have the proposal that once that the conference to review the charter has been installed, our proposal in Mexico is not to make any proposal to reform the charter because there is veto right. Instead of reform proposal, we in CEMERG are promoting the transformation legal figure of the entity to transform the entity of organization into a world parliament. Would you agree with that proposal, Dr. Sharei?
In terms of my own personal opinion or some research we've done at Concord, we basically, we have some thoughts, but our policy at the center as a think tank is not to endorse any kind of solution. I think the solution has to come up at the forum, at the review constitutional conference with all governments and hopefully NGOs and people somehow represented for the review conference. And that's where we should be converging to at the Constitutional Convention of the UN. However, I totally agree with you that we need a world parliament, obviously, and your key terminology that you use. We don't want UN reform, cosmetic reform. We want transformation, upgrade the UN to 2.0.
Thank you.
I don't see other hands, so I have a question. I didn't know until I read your chapters that the General Assembly can pass things over the Security Council if it has a 2/3 majority. So will that be the mechanism for you to implement this? We are going to have a constitutional review. The challenge isn't just getting the vote. It's also implementing it because you know the title in your book is The Promise. Well, the promise was broken. So what is to prevent future broken promises?
Very good question and challenging. Let me clarify. I don't think I have mentioned anywhere that the 2/3 majority of General Assembly can override a Security Council decision. In fact, the way Charter is architectured, the only legal lawmaking body of the UN is the Security Council. That's the one that can make instant laws. Like we'll get to it. There are laws on that they passed after the 9/11 that was comprehensive, covered the whole world, and it was the only, legal reference. So the thing is that in order to have a charter review, according to Article 1 of Section 1 of Article 109 is the 2/3 majority vote in General Assembly. So if the 2/3 majority asks for a charter review, separate, like a constitution, it doesn't even have to be in New York. Doesn't need to report to General Assembly. It's a constitutional convention, like another Philadelphia. So it's going to be a separate forum, and that one needs 2/3 approval of General Assembly. In my belief, that's very difficult to get these days, the 2/3, but the special provision was that paragraph 3. It only required a simple majority. It's already adopted in 1955 by both General Assembly as well as Security Council. So it's already valid. It's already ahead of that. It's just waiting for it to happen. We'll get to it in the future chapters.
Okay, I don't see other hands of people who have not.
Winston, I
was up
think,
first.
So I will return to Bob, who has.
No, Winston's
Winston.
still on the first round. His hand was up first.
Oh, who? Sorry.
Winston.
Oh, sorry, Winston. I missed your
He's
hand.
doing his flesh hand.
Oh, okay. Winston, go ahead. You might be on mute.
Thank you, Professor Sharaf, for your presentation to us and the discussions in San Francisco. I myself have done a bit of that, but more with the non-governmental organizations there, not so much with the government. I wonder if in your research you found anything related to US-Mexico ties at that time. Greg Grandin, The Empire's Workshop, that's a book, contends that there would never have been a ratification of the UN Charter, but for an understanding with Mexico, through whom most of the negotiations with Latin American countries took place, to support the Charter in view of the promised general reform after a decade.
No, unfortunately, I haven't, dug into the Latin America and Mexico relationship with the US at the time. But in my research, there was the Association of American States already in existence. Rockefeller family had big influence in Latin America and the banana republics, they called them. So Rockefeller was appointed by US State Department to get involved in the San Francisco conference. And it's in the book. There is a couple of parties that he gave. He was, wining and dining the Latin American countries to vote for the US. But in fact, Latin America countries were one of the most outspoken countries against the veto. And the reason was that they were not touched by the war. Because, for example, Belgium, Netherlands, all these countries were just under friendly occupation. It was friendly, but the US, British soldiers were right there. How could they insist on opposing the permanent five and their decision? And this is in future chapters, we see it, that how they were put under stress in some extent to agree with the Security Council. There wasn't much disagreement with other parts of the charter, and everybody was progressive and offering new things, and it was getting adopted. The only frozen part of the charter was the Security Council. And Latin Americans had a big role in opposing it.
Okay.
Yes, he went into the role of Rockefeller in some detail. And the reason for my asking bears on a later development in the proposed international economic order in the 1970s, during which the Reagan administration and Margaret Thatcher from Britain are said to have had a secret understanding with Mexico to work with the Latin American counterparts again to forego what was then a generally popular proposal coming from the global south. So I've been trying to find information on those two developments, and it has in part prompted my question to you.
I'm sorry, I really don't have much to contribute and don't know much about it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some other folks can comment on it.
Okay, Bob, go ahead with your second question.
No, Joseph hasn't gone yet. Let him go before me. I've already gone.
Sorry, I didn't see Joseph's hand. I can't see everybody at once on my screen.
Yeah, you gotta jump back and forth.
Well, one thing I know, and maybe Shari, you can confirm this, is that at San Francisco, it's true that the Latin Americans and the Mexicans, Senor Padilla, for instance, were very opposed to the veto. But I believe the whole charter articles on the Economic and Social Council were very influenced by the Latin Americans. I've always understood that ECOSOC is the creature of the Latin Americans who look forward to economic assistance in the future. Also, I believe Article 51 was contributed by the Latinos because they feared that the Yankee power to the north might intervene once again in their countries, and they did not want to have a U.S. veto preventing them from defending themselves. So the Article 51 provides for a national self-defense in case the Security Council is paralyzed by the veto. I believe so. Those two, ECOSOC and Article 51, are pretty good examples of the influence of the Latin Americans.
First of all, I appreciate your 2-volume book. I read it a lot in some other chapters. It's referred to it, like especially the activities in 1940s and early 50s of US Congress and Senate in terms of trying to reform and transform the UN. All that stopped with Kissinger and Nixon administration. And in fact, they passed a resolution to keep the UN Charter frozen. It's an official US policy. But back to Latin America, yeah, based on the meeting minutes, etc. And my focus was the Security Council, but I came across to many places that they would contribute to human rights being mentioned in the charter, 3-4 places, women's rights, like Brazil, not women's rights, but women and men equality. And they also knew that there is no enforcement of these declarations or the preamble. So they even proposed that the ICJ jurisdiction be compulsory, which it's not, and even a human rights court to be established. But they were all very happy, jubilant mode, because they were promised that we're going to have this charter review. That's the time that we're going to accommodate your requests. Regarding Article 51, if that's a self-defense one, again, it's not part of my expertise, but actually that's one of the 2 articles in the charter that allows wars. So in fact, in a charter, that problem resolutions are not going to be through wars. In other words, laws become illegal. Article 51 has to be corrected. The other one is in Chapter 7 of Chapter 7 Security Council decisions, which they can use land, sea, and air for by any means to start a war. And that happened, like the latest one was in Libya. Prior to that was Afghanistan. The Libya was no-fly zone.
Okay, it's 1:22. Do we have announcements? If not, we'll get Bob's question.
Yeah, my name is Sadiq Khalil. Thank you, everyone. I'm very happy to be here discussing the book. I didn't actually read the book, Dr. Shari, but I'm planning to do in the coming few days. My question is, like, if we thought optimistically and assume that the reform happened, how do you think the charter review would affect, or it would change the lives of the ordinary people? And another question is actually the title of the book. Like, what inspires you to select this particular title for the book?
Thank you. Actually, Al-Sadegh is from Sudan, and he's one of our youth climate ambassadors. He's been to UNFCCC COP negotiations 3 times. And yes, and he's very concerned right now about the Sudan war. Nobody can really predict what happened at the Charter Review, but my analogy that I use is what happened at the Maastricht Treaty and with the EU, and also the Philadelphia Constitutional Convention that US had. Same thing, there is going to be a constitutional moment. It might happen in the first charter review, it might happen in the second charter review. When the constitutional moment occurs, then this war as a problem resolution goes away. And with that, you need freedom of movement. Like in the EU model, there are 3 freedoms, like freedom of movement, freedom of travel, work, that you can go to any of those countries. So this concept would be introduced in the charter. And like in the Sudan war, it would never happen because nobody would supply the arms to either side. Their conflict would be resolved in the courts, which have enforcement. Now, regarding the title of the book, it was when I was reading these statements from all these good people in San Francisco, and they were seeing everything and they knew what the solution is going to be. And this charter is not going to work for peace and security. So the solution was to have the review conference or the constitutional review. So the future is really in the past.
Okay, Binta, your turn. You're on mute. Unmute, please.
In conversations, I joined the meeting a bit late, but I'm very impressed with the presentations by Dr. Sharia. So my question is Article 109, the San Francisco Promise. As the UN turns 80 this September, what are the prospects for this? Because the title is very germane. It talks about past and the future. So what's the prospect for post 80th anniversary of the UN as we go forward?
Thank you, Binta. Binta is also has worked with us in the climate change and has been with us a couple of times to UN conference on climate change. To be honest with you, I think zero. Nothing is going to happen. The way the UN Charter has been frozen for the past 80 years, it's going to be on its 81st year. It would continue. And the only way is that it needs to come from, the pressure has to come from the people. That's where Citizens for Global Solutions and climate change activists, if they really want climate emergency to end, need a new UN. And we need to spread the message. One of the ladies brought up this issue. Yes, Anabizil. Yeah, we have to go to the public. And this is our challenge. It's not going to work at the state level. Absolutely, it's not going to work at the New York level. It's been tried so many times. It needs to be in each individual capitals and working towards their legislation. We'll talk about it in the future chapters. I think we have to take UN transformation from the hands of states, which have short-term interests, their governments, their leaders, to the people. And the way we do that is through legislation. In other words, through our parliaments, we have to ask for UN transformation, not from our presidents or our State Department. They are too much entrenched in their own short-term interests. Nobody, and especially Permanent Five, I've talked to all of them, interesting responses, except Russia, and they all have their reason, and I think it's a fake reason, that they want to keep the veto. So it's a tough challenge. It has to be demanded from their national publics. That's the only way. It's not going to happen in New York.
Okay, we just have a couple minutes left. Is there anybody who has an announcement? Okay, if not, can we get Bob's question? If you can make it quick, Bob.
Sure. I may actually need to jump off. There's someone coming to the house. If the bell rings, I jump. But Sharia, my question is related to the last one, as I'm thinking a lot about the operationalizing what you're suggesting. And my question is that, under the current system, the primary political unit is the nation state, okay? But the dream of world federation, when we go elect our legislatures to the world government, the primary unit is the individual, the global citizen. So there's a shift, okay? Again, given the current political climate, if we could do a charter review and go through that, what is your sense, again, given the strong men of the world and all that, that we could retain that fundamental principle of the primary unit still being the individual and not going to the nation state, i.e. to these strong men and other crazy people? Thank you.
Yeah, that's our biggest challenge. I really cannot predict. But again, we have good examples. The example is the European Union, what happened to some of their constitutional conventions. All of a sudden, they had a parliamentary assembly, the common market in Europe, and it had no powers, not just like a general assembly. Then in Maastricht Treaty, with Maastricht Treaty, they created a European Parliament with limited powers. But at each review conference, you might say, at each constitutional review they had, they increased, expanded, the trust was made between the different states that they can trust each other, that there are benefits to collective security versus, states' absolute sovereignty. And it's an evolutionary process. I don't think it would happen in the first review, but I'm hoping the first review would give some rights. It would limit the use of veto. It would give climate change, some power, more serious infrastructure to deal with. And as far as the ICJ, the ICJ decisions to become compulsory. Those I think could be achieved in the first review, but we won't have a full-fledged parliament, I don't think. And that requires the constitutional moment, which happened in Philadelphia. And I don't know if this is going to happen with the first round or the second round of the charter review.
Great. Thanks so much. See you next time. I got to jump now. Bye-bye.
Okay. So long. We'll miss you.
We're out of time. James, we have one more question from somebody who hasn't asked a question. Do we have time for her if Sharia is willing to stay on?
Sure. Vernita, yes, I think.
Okay, Vernita?
Yes.
Vernita.
Congratulations, Dr. Sharia, and thank you for sharing your very important work with all of us. You had mentioned it will not happen in the traditional way in terms of invoking the UN Charter Review. What would you suggest in terms of even making it a popular movement in terms of, you mentioned the people, it has to come to the people, but if you've already talked about that, I apologize for needing to come on late. But if you have specific examples, when I am in areas and talking with young students, they are ready to go. And also some of the grassroots movements, they are ready once they hear the reasoning and the thinking. I would just like to know your thoughts about engaging the popular space and the popular movements. Thank you.
It's you, Vernita. You can do it.
Yeah.
Vernita is in our board of directors, and she's doing research on culture, music, dance, how they could bring people together. And this is such an important concept in making us feeling planetary citizens. And, this is our home, this is our nation, the world is our nation. So I think if we beg you to work on this more and to come up with common music for all of us, maybe common holidays for all of us. And Europeans did it too with the Eurovision. With the Eurovision, they started having singers get together, all of them from different countries, and they give prizes. So I think that would be, and maybe you can add on your own comments, but that's a fantastic way of getting global citizens involved. We have to create commonality between them.
And I should say right now, I'm speaking to you from Barbados. Barbados just completed what is called Carafesta. It's something that happens every 3 to 5 years, and it changes islands. If the vision, if the thinking, if the putting it in place, if the engagement that happened at Carafesta could be directed into what we're talking about creating a new global governance system, I think we could do this. Also, what was so interesting about Carafesta, not only was it celebration of the arts, they had the conversations called the big conversations. So while the arts were going on, the conversations were going on. There's so many possibilities, and the people were rallying, and anyway, there are possibilities. So congratulations, and I think there's a lot we can do.
Fabulous.
I love what you just said, and we need a lot more of that. And people are ready.
And I happen to be in the country, Barbados, where Mia Motley in 1921 actually said, the Prime Minister of Barbados, in the well of the United Nations, who in here is ready to sign the new Charter of the United Nations? 2021, you can find it on the United Nations website in terms of the actual video of her footage. So it's here, but timing and everything is very important. But she's so astute in terms of knowing the politics, the culture, and all that's involved in moving us in this direction. So thank you.
Yeah, she's a great leader, and in General Assembly last year, she really was to the point regarding Security Council and use of veto. And a couple of years ago, they weren't talked about, but last year, and again, Marco did the research, there were like 20, 30 countries that spoke against the Security Council for the first time.
We're out of time, so we're going to need to wrap up.